We've got Sam at Through the Mist. We've got Ryan Mills over here, Saints and Steel. And then we have Jeff Borders. And today we are talking about how to survive Utah culture. And to start us all off, we came across a video that I want to share. Tanner, let's pull that up. It's from a girl who has, I guess she was a member outside of Utah, born and raised her whole life. She moves to Utah and then has a very important message to say after being in Utah for a hot minute. So Tanner, let's pull up that video and we can watch together.
Okay, let me know if you can hear it.
So I am genuinely seeking advice. And if you're not LDS or you're not part of any religion, then you can just keep on scrolling. I'm going to delete your mean comments anyway. But I have a lot of LDS followers, and I've spoken with some of you already, and I feel like I have a lot of just really phenomenal people and a lot of knowledge and people that follow me and I follow. And I am really, really struggling with the church in its culture, not the doctrine. I feel like the doctrine is sound in my heart and in my testimony, but I live in Utah, and I feel like it is so hard to find the doctrine within the culture. And I feel like we're getting to a point where it's not even culture, it's like trends, it's like marketing. It's like if you can market the church, or if you like, it's just so hard to find the doctrine. It really is. And it feels like so much of it is like TV shows and TikTok and all these things, and it really is starting to mess with my testimony. And I have tried to make it a challenge to deepen my own conversion and go to the temple and read my scriptures and deepen my own relationship with God, because at the end of the day, my own relationship is all that matters. But it is still really hard when you live in a place where it just feels like things aren't like, I don't like agree with a lot of things. And I think the culture is so heavy that it if you did not know the doctrine, you would just think the culture was the whole entire church. And even as a member my whole life, like I grew up in Michigan, so zero culture, only doctrine, but I grew up in Michigan. So like coming somewhere like Utah and having it so in the church integrated into people's everyday lives and is really hard. It's like really, really hard, and just really am having a hard time. And I really look up to a lot of you, and I really value your guys' opinions, and I just was hoping that maybe you had some thoughts and some things, especially if you live in Utah, of how to find the doctrine in the culture and the trends. Especially it's like buzzwords and trendy, and we've like almost lost sight of the doctrine itself. And I'm really having a hard time just like living here and being a part of that. And so yeah, if you have any thoughts, I would really love to hear them. So I'm
Okay, thank you for that. I forgot how long that was. Did that was I the only one that felt like that went a little long?
It was long.
I bet she's got to be a Relief Society president or something, because she took the scenic route on that.
Yeah, she filibustered a little bit there. Yeah,
she did. Yeah. I think my kids are going to college now. So here's the deal. So she's talking about having a hard time getting through the culture of the church. Let's get some initial reactions, and then we'll dive into it a little bit. So Ryan, why don't you start us off? Because I know let's get some background. So first of all, let's start there. Background: who here has lived in Utah before?
Currently in Utah.
Me, Tanner.
Yep.
Ryan.
All right, we got a few of us.
Tanner's currently in Utah. Okay. Have you guys visited Utah? Have you gone to school in Utah or anything like that?
Visited, and a kid that went to school there.
Passed through.
All right.
Got
Okay.
a couple of Philistines here with us tonight. Yeah.
A few Gentiles. Yeah.
I'm taking the scenic route through Utah. I'm taking the scenic route.
Yeah.
Through the desert. Yeah.
So I think we've got a great amount of experience here inside and outside the church, I think we'll be able to give her a well-rounded opinion and some helpful tips. So first of all, Ryan, why don't you start us off? You tell us about your Utah experience and give us a background about how you know Utah.
Okay. So I grew up in Utah County, northern Utah County.
Oof.
Oof.
Sorry for your loss.
Like, yeah. Oh, buddy, I feel you on that one.
That sounds bad.
But I have lived outside of Utah. So I live in the Midwest now, and I've lived in the Midwest now for almost 20 years. So I'm like, spent my, first 18, 19 years in Utah. I've spent the same amount of time outside of Utah. And she's not wrong. Like, she's kind of spot on. But what's interesting for me, at least, is like, had I not left Utah for an extended period of time, like more than just the mission, because like when you go on a mission and you come back, like I don't care where you're from, the culture is different. It's weird. Like that you can't really use that as a judge. But when you've lived outside of Utah and inside of Utah, you can tell there's a big difference in the culture. And like I gotta say, like going back after being away, man, it's disappointing. So I can kind of just like maybe tee it up right there, but I think she's spot on, and especially hearing that she lived, or she I think she said she grew up in Michigan. Like going from anywhere outside of that like western kind of like Intermountain corridor, it's gonna be really different. It's gonna be like a culture shock for sure.
Oh yeah.
Now,
yeah,
I can go further into the details if you want, but maybe give everybody else kind of a chance to jump in, and then I'll share my thoughts too.
Yeah. So Jeff, what are your initial reactions?
I actually was hoping she'd give more specifics on what she thought. The
and you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
If you pay attention to her post, like she ended up deleting the comment section, and she gave a little disclaimer. She's like, I deleted all the comments. I'm not allowing commenting on this post because so many people asked me for specifics. And she's like, at this point, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then your opinion's not relevant. So get wrecked is basically what she said.
I mean, just from I've never lived in Utah. I've born and raised in Washington State. So the closest, we've traveled to Utah for different things. Had a kid that is at BYU. So, I mean, just that little bit. And so I would say that I enjoy being in a place where I'm not immersed in the culture or like I get to rub shoulders with a lot of different people here. And so the analogy that I like to use on my kids is if you're fertilizing a lawn, if you put all the fertilizer in one place, it just kills the place. That fertilizer has to be spread all over. And so we as Latter-day Saints, if we might be fertilizing one place a little too much. And maybe that, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Did you just say there. Utah is full of crap?
I didn't say that.
That's what I heard.
That's what I heard. Freaking Philistines, dude. Just dumping all over Utah.
Dissing on Utah.
I somewhat wonder if some of that is a generalized culture, a wealth culture that we see within the U.S. It seems to be exaggerated within the Utah corridor because we're prosperous people. We do really well for ourselves, and so some of that could be a wealth culture thing and not necessarily just a Utah culture thing. Maybe I'm off on that.
No, I think you're right. I think Utah has a serious case of affluenza when it comes to church culture. Like it's poisoned almost everybody. And the fact that we often see the cultural correlation between wealth and blessings from God leads to some fundamentally weird feelings that people have, right? Because I think that's one of the things she's probably recognized, that a lot of people attribute their wealth as a direct blessing from God, but then all the poor people in Utah are like, why aren't we rich, huh?
So what you're saying is it becomes a prosperity gospel of sorts.
There's definitely a flavor of that, a streak of that in Utah for sure.
There's a segment of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sam, what are your thoughts?
No, I think my opinions are a lot along the lines of Jeff's. Like from the outside looking in, it seems like there's a hint of something that I'm just not familiar with, being on, growing up in Southern California, but then living the last 10 years on the East Coast. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like Jeff was talking about, with the amount of fertilizer in one spot. Or it's almost like if you're making like cookies from scratch and you put in the salt maybe a little bit too late, but you're hand folding the dough, but then that salt chunk like stays in that one little spot. You take a bite of that cookie and you're like, that's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
I personally, I've always wanted to live in Utah because you kind of have that the same kind of thought around you at all times, which I think is it could be beneficial. But yeah, I can kind of see, I was kind of confused when she was kind of explaining her issues with the church and the church culture, because like Jeff said, and like you guys have articulated, like she didn't really go into depth on what exactly there was. And
it was coded.
Yeah. And not living in Utah, or not growing up in Utah, or being around people from Utah that often, I don't really have anything to draw from in comparison.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I can give some insight to that a little bit. So when we
Enlighten
were,
us.
yeah, when I was like age 11, 12, 13, we lived in Las Vegas. So I started cultivating my identity as a member of the church was when we were living in Vegas. And that was a great place to do it. It was very stark. Like you're a member of the church and everyone thought you were weird for it. And you just had a very like black and white understanding of where you stood in society and where you stood at church. Then we moved to the heart of Wasatch Front, and it just kind of like everything got really gray really quickly, right? Like I knew the people that I identified with, we followed certain things, but then I'd go to school and I see people doing things contrary to that all over the place, and see those same people go and bear their testimony on Sunday about the things that they believe, which they acted against during the week, right? So there's a culture around like I should go bear my testimony because my parents expect me to. Whether or not I actually believe that is different, because I'm going to act differently during the week, and it's going to lead to some very like gray area, which it's okay. It's okay to have gray area. You're supposed to think for yourself and not rely upon what other people are doing. But as a young preteen becoming a teenager in this space, it was really confusing for a little bit. Like, oh man, I have to think for myself. I can't rely on the kind of tribe or the brotherhood that I had at church like I did in Vegas, because it was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. We move into a cultural blend with the religious practice that you have. So it gets really funky in that sense, Yeah.
I mean, I remember it being a big shock. Because like in middle school, I was in middle school when we were in Vegas, and it was like I was one of about 4 members of the church in that school, and also one of about 4 white people in the school too. So like going from that to like the heart of like Davis County, Utah, it was complete night and day, 180, just complete difference, and it was pretty stark. And kind of to your point, what you're getting at, I think, is Utah is one of the primary places where you find a segment of members where you don't really find elsewhere, and that's cultural members. So you will find cultural members that are members because it's popular, it's tradition, and it's just what people do, who aren't necessarily members because they have a solid testimony as much as because it's like socially convenient for them to be members of the church. And that's not something that you really find outside of the church, because it's not very convenient for you to be a member of the church anywhere else outside of like Utah and maybe Arizona, maybe Idaho is what I would say. But Ryan, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Well, no, you're good. I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head. And I'm guessing just kind of, from that girl's comments from the video that we watched, or from her reel, like I think that's what she's talking about. It's that gray, like I would actually call it like hollow. It's that like hollow shell of like I live, like, Hayden, what you were saying, I live the culture of the church. I'm a church person, but I'm not like a gospel of Jesus Christ person. Right. I'll give you I'll give you a real life example. Actually, I could give you a couple, but I'll give you one that now shocks me. Like, I look back on this. So when I was in high school, our baseball team would go and Tanner, you guys talking about this reminded me of, we would go to Vegas every spring for a tournament. Right. Now, my high school team, everybody, if I'm thinking about it, I think everybody on the team except for one guy, we were all members of the church. We all went to seminary together or skipped seminary together, whatever you want, depending on the day.
Yeah.
We were all going to either Gandolfo's or we were going to seminary, one of the two. Like, everybody on that team and everybody that went down on that bus, we were all members of the church, and we all knew that we were members of the church. But there was never a question about how we were going to, like, leave at night, escape the hotel to go down to the strip so we could see how long we could spend in the casino before they kicked us out as 16, 17-year-old guys, right? And when they kicked us out, every time, all we would do was just go back to, like, one hotel room. Everybody would go there and we would order porn. And everybody would watch it together, which was really weird. Like, looking back on it now, I'm like, that's just really super weird.
Community
but I think
bonding
that's
right
a really
there.
good example. Like, but then every single one of us would then go bless the sacrament on Sunday when we got home, right? And and it wasn't like I'm sure some of us, and like I say, now looking back on it, I'm like, gosh, dude, that was just as hollow and fake as I can imagine. But at the time, that's what we did. And there was one guy, and I use this story to talk to my kids all the time now. There was one guy on that team that was like, yeah, no, I'm not watching that, out of like 15 of us. So I think that is like an example of, even back then, I think it's way worse now, but even back then, that's kind of the culture that was creeping in. And most of those guys went on missions. I went on a mission. Like, okay, sure, maybe we repented. That's fine. That's a different story. But at the time, it was just like, no, we're going to Vegas, so we're going to go gamble as much as we can and try to get away with it illegally. And then when we have to go back to our rooms, we're just going to watch porn all night.
Which is interesting. Normal. Yeah, well, to that story, the fact that you blessed the sacrament afterwards, or that group did, was more about the fear of people not seeing you bless the sacrament. I'm almost certain of it. Right. It's the fear of the 100%. Cultural shame. That's like, oh, he's not pure, like, and people taking the sacrament against their own desire because they're too afraid of other people seeing them not take the sacrament. Right. So it's interesting because, like, the cultural understanding of the culture of the church sometimes in Utah, the Utah culture, is almost completely void of the atonement and the understanding of the atonement and the repentance process and forgiveness. There is no forgiveness in the cultural shame that you feel. Like, if you follow through on your testimony and say, I can't bless the sacrament this week because I need to work on stuff, like, the judgment that you would give from that would be very harsh, on a cultural sense. So that's very interesting to me, because that's a great example of where those collide and what she's probably struggling with in some sense.
Yep. Tanner, do you have any chats that we need to catch up on real quick? Sorry to cut you off.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Let's see. So Timber Harvard said, served my mission in Utah. Utah Mormon culture is real, but church culture isn't a monolith. It's very different in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. I agree, Timber.
100%. We got to get him on the show.
Yeah. Didn't we just do that? I see. You're joking. Okay. I got it. Yeah. The brother of Jared said, I was raised in the church in Southern California, and I'm glad I was. There's no room to be complacent. You were the church, all hands on deck. See, that's a great way of putting it. You were the church, right?
Yep.
Not you were in the church.
Right.
And that's an issue I think a lot of people in Utah have, is that the church is around you whether you like it or not, culturally. So he also says the pride cycle is at its peak in Utah. I agree with that. We're at the top of that. 100%. We're at the top of the roller coaster right now, and it's gonna go down.
Ready
really
for some
quick.
famine.
Yeah, absolutely. Zachary Thornton said, a lot to do about nothing. Bashing the culture isn't helping the people I love, so I choose to ignore the not so many negatives. He's looking on the bright side. He's saying it's not as bad as we think. So
Way to
maybe
keep
it's
on
not.
the sunny side.
Yeah,
Totally
absolutely.
disagree with that one.
Hard disagree. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Ignoring the problems and pretending like they aren't there doesn't help. Like you
No.
have to call it out. If you don't call it out and call it for what it is, that's kind of exactly what the problem is with Utah culture, like Utah church culture. It's like, yeah, we're just going to pretend like this isn't the issue and ignore what the issues really are. But guess what? I'm going to show up and my family's going to look flipping great on the front pew in sacrament meeting. And that's what really matters.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's the problem.
Oh.
Right. We want to repress, right? Like we want to repress that crap. We don't, that's the culture of the church right there is, it's appearance based. And so I have a theory. So I think there are two, if I had to get into the cultural members, I would say there are two main groups of cultural members. They are what I call neo-Sadducees and neo-Pharisees. Okay. So the neo-Sadducees of Utah, they're the really well-to-do people. These are the very wealthy people who have a lot of clout, and then they use that clout to further their own interests. Okay. So what am I talking about? So I'm talking about like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Like that's someone I would call like a neo-Sadducee, like a cultural member, clearly not Orthodox, right? But who is using their brand as like a TikToker or an influencer to kind of further their own interests, make more money, build their own family's empire, kind of thing. When I was on my mission, there was this super wealthy guy. We'll call him Elder Commander, because this kid, he had zero real world experience, right? But he wanted to tell everybody what to do. So we always call him Elder Commander. So Elder Commander, he's out there, and one Sunday, like he's working with this gal, and he came from a huge, big, wealthy Utah family from Salt Lake City. He's working with this gal who wants to explore the church. She's been investigating. She's not sure about baptism. And so they're meeting with her, and he's like, hey, if I give you my iPod Touch, would you get baptized? And she was like, yeah. And so she got baptized because he gave her an iPod, and his mission companion was like, you're going to hell for that, right? And he was like, what? No. He was like so taken aback, like, no, this is how we do things at home. I was just like, so you have like a cultural segment of members that are just like that, that just kind of live and breathe just kind of money, politics, and the ways of the world, which is really, really weird. So these are the people that are setting the trends. These are the ones that are the influencers. They're the mommy bloggers. These are the ones that are saying, all right, you got to have this kind of cup. If you want to be cool, you got to do your hair this way. You got to have these leggings, and you need to do X, Y, and Z. Then you're going to be with the in crowd. And then you have the neo-Pharisees.
An iPod Touch, though, like those were legit. I was so envious of people who had an iPod Touch. Those were, let's give some credit to the iPod Touch. Doing the Lord's work right there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, clearly, right? So, so.
Well, and he probably learned that because that's why he was out, because it was, hey, son, if you go out on your mission, I will buy you whatever car you want when you get back.
Yeah. Or I'll pay for your college.
There was that.
Yeah.
Or we'll pay for your college. Like I for sure had friends that did that. Like it was either like, hey, I'm on my mission because daddy said he would buy me a car or pay for my college, or I'm on my mission because my girlfriend said she wouldn't marry anybody who wasn't a return missionary.
Yeah.
Like, and then maybe there's a few guys that were like, I'm on my mission because like I really believe this is the right thing to do.
There is nothing like the faith crisis of going on a mission just because your girlfriend wanted to marry an RM, only to have her Dear John you halfway through. Like that's rough, dude. There's some poor elders out there. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff. I cut you off.
I was just going to say that it's. I've even had conversations with. I'm one of two members at the place that I work, and the girl that I share an office with. She follows a lot of, she's not a member, but she follows a lot of Mormon mommy bloggers on Instagram. And so we've had a lot of conversations on, wow, there seems to be a lot of wealth. There seems to be a lot of plastic surgery. They're doing this, they're doing that. And we've had a lot of conversations on, because she's like, this isn't how you are. So like, yeah, there's
the disconnect.
There's a disconnect of what she's seeing when she shares an office with me versus what is being displayed on social media, through like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. That has brought a ton of conversation. And I would actually say that being outside of Utah and having to talk to people about these things, I don't know if these conversations come up where you have to explain your faith a lot. People somehow, like, I'm not shy about the fact that I'm a member of the church, but there's always questions, and I have to really know in my heart, how am I going to answer that in a way that is satisfies people. And sometimes I'm like, when we're talking about the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, I can't tell you how many times I was asked if I watched that show, and I'd be like, yeah, they're members, but they're not. I mean, they're more culturally members, like you were saying, where they're living this culture of the church rather than the doctrine or the lifestyle.
mean, they had an equal claim to Islam with the amount of practice and religion that they were. It might have well been the Secret Lives of Muslim wives. Is they're so different with how they behave and live to either religion.
Well, and it was just interesting to me to see when I'm talking to this person that I share an office with, that they recognize too that there is a disconnect, there is a difference. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
So the other piece with the Neo-Sadducees, right? So the cultural segment of Neo-Sadducees that I've seen, having grown up in Utah, lived there in my adult life, are members who leverage their last names to get them ahead. So if their last name is connected to like an apostle or like a higher up in the church, they will hold on to that thing and they will milk it for all it's worth. And you will see this most especially with like women. So if they have like an apostolic last name, they will keep that as their maiden name and use it in all of their marketing materials to try and push their product out there. So you'll see, like, I saw so many women running for like positions in like my local community, right? And you'll see a lot of like Jenny McConkey Thomas, or you'll see like some like a Susan Talmadge Hughes or something like that, and they'll just hyphenate just to try and milk as much as they can. So you kind of, it's a flex, they're using that political sway of like, ooh, look at me, and so, or like Jenny Oaks Baker, right? So there's a gal who plays the violin who just kept that last name in there. I have to think because it was for marketing purposes, right? She went huge, related to President Oaks. I'm like, So, so you see that flavor in there, but you also see a line of like nepotism as well. So the people that can use their influence and then they just pull up their family members with them. And so as soon as I got out of my unpaid internship, I was looking for work like crazy. There was a kid who graduated like 2 years after I did. I was still looking for work, and he got right into like one of the higher up positions at Zions Bank because he knew his dad was one of the higher ups there. And he was like, oh yeah, this is yours. And I was just like, oh man, my dad at the time was a higher up in another company. And I was like, hey dad, Utah nepotism. Hey. And he was like, yeah, I can get you a job. And so I was like, sweet. I got it in the bag. He sends me a link to the website, the company website where the interns apply. And he's just like, here you go. Just send in an application there.
You started.
I was like, no. Yeah. Where's the sweetheart deal, Dad? Come on. Yeah.
Upsies. So, I need upsies. Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. I need the granite countertops, please. Yeah. So that's right.
Would you guys mind if I
play so there is that
devil's advocate here?
Yes, please
play away.
With Sister Davis's profile, I'm noticing a lot of familiar trends that I actually find with ex-members who are actually grifting off of leaving the church on her profile. So one of them is founder of @prude.co. So her brand name is Prude.
Huh.
Right?
Interesting.
And under
on
her
the
description is Utah, modest fashion, dress for your body type. finding self-worth, and then adding the Church of Jesus Christ. So
Look at that.
I feel like there's kind of somewhat of a double standard being used here.
Is this irony that we're sensing here?
She's just trying to take out the competition at this point.
Certainly.
That's the only way you can. That's how you have to play the game in Utah. Like, what else? You can't be successful otherwise.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so,
right.
I mean, you find this with, like you guys were saying, a lot of like needing to plug like your family lineage, or maybe adding the church in your like professional sphere in order to, increase your viewability in, like the Utah sphere. Right. And so
Right.
I don't
right.
think that individuals are free and clear just because they start, taking the more righteous path of like, oh, look at me, like I have like this very modest clothing line, and look at all these like things that I'm doing here, while at the same time adding the church. So I don't know, like I don't know where I kind of fall in
So
that
are you
spectrum.
saying that was like her attempt at like appearing faithful and orthodox, to try and sway more people to buy her clothes?
Yeah,
She's just trying to fill up her pipeline.
Yeah, I'm not saying either way, but like I'm always very skeptical of people who are like that, right? It's like either the clothes are good or they're not,
100%.
right? Like, okay, your clothes are modest.
Right. The church has nothing to do with this. Yeah.
I don't think the church is endorsing your clothing line. So let's kind of
stop tagging them in all your posts. Is that what you're saying?
on the same token, I do appreciate when people do at the church, because like it does show like, hey, I'm a faithful member of this church, and perhaps other people who are not members of the church, perhaps this could be a good like missionary tool, right? I sell these modest clothes.
Yeah.
Oh, you like modest clothes? Well, people of my faith tradition also like modest clothes, but you kind of see this as well a little bit with like the whole soda culture in Utah. Like I did a little bit of studying before I jumped on here to see like what the Utah culture was. Unfortunately, when I did that on a YouTube search, it gave me a lot of like anti members.
Yeah.
Like talking about the negatives of the culture. And one of them was like the whole like soda culture. But if you think about the soda culture, it's replacing a vice of like, like the alcoholic bar scene. And it's just taking that vice and just transferring it over to like caffeinated beverages. And so I'm not entirely convinced that it's like much better. Like there's really, I mean, obviously there's the negative effects of alcohol for sure. But like you're just taking that culture and just shifting it over to another product. And so,
well, even if it's not caffeinated, it's incredibly sugary. They might as well call them like diabetes bars at this point. It's like,
and this is
it's
what
terrible for the body.
The heart of that thing is what really bothers me. What bothers a lot of people is that people aren't brave enough to be themselves, right? Like if you believe in the church, you should act accordingly. If you don't, like maybe that's not a good thing to say, but if you want to go drink and if you don't believe in the benefits of following the word of wisdom, then just go do that. Don't try and fill it with this weird substitute and create this bizarre subculture in the church that obsesses around dirty drinks, or like highly caffeinated beverages. Don't go to swig. Just be more authentic to yourself, right? There's a lot of inauthenticity in that, which really bothers me.
Yeah, just drink a Coke Zero like the normal people, all right?
Yeah,
just go to Sam's
drink water.
Yourself a 24-pack, all right?
Come on.
Yeah, like come
exactly.
on, like a dirty Dr. Pepper. I mean, that'll change your life. Come on, you gotta
Maybe I'm missing the real spiritual experience at Swig. That's
that's
what I'm missing.
I think you do bring up a really good point, though. Like I think that's probably like where the conversation maybe should lead is like why do we see this like mixing of doctrine and culture? Because I think that's like the what you just talked about is like hey, I'm just taking this one vice that the rest of the world lives, but because the letter of the law says this, I'm gonna just insert my own little vice in place of that. I don't think that's like the spirit.
I got the answer.
That's where like the doctrine and the culture start to mix in not so good of a way.
Yeah. So I've got the answer to that. So this is the second group of cultural members. It's the neo-Pharisees. Okay. So the Neo-Pharisees are members who value the laws of men more than the laws of God, but they know the laws of God well enough to circumvent them so that they can ultimately obey the laws of man, right? It's kind of technical, but I'll give you some examples. So these are the people that start up the soda shops, but those are also the people where you hear about all of those like weird and cringy like college trends, you know, like the adult stuff, like the sex stuff that happens on college campuses where you're just like, what in the world? Like there was this like, have you ever heard of like table topping?
Well, don't Google that.
Don't Google it. Don't Google
I
it.
got married at 19, so
Yeah. Well, basically, so this
time
is
ago.
one of my mission companions. His dad was a bishop at like Utah State. And he's like, there has just been a wave of table topping lately. And we're like, what in the world is table topping? And so you find a glass table, and so basically you undress, one of you lays on top, the other gets underneath, right? And that's it. And you're like, hey, we're kind of doing this, but we're kind of not, you know? It is the weirdest crap out there. Any person in their sane mind would look at that and be like, what went wrong? Because clearly something went wrong here. And I'm saying it's the Neo-Pharisee, right? These are people that are like, well, I can't break the commandment of like the social pressure of needing to keep the law of chastity, but I really want to break the law of chastity. I know. And they see that glass tabletop over there and they're like, carry the two. Okay, there we go, you know, and they make it happen, you know. It's like it leads to a bunch of weird stuff, but also it leads to like these weird family traditions. There was like this elder on my mission who it was his birthday. So he was like, I don't go to church on my birthday. He took his name tag off. He just played Xbox all day. So he was just like, it's my birthday. I don't have to go to church on my birthday. Out. That's just what I did. Yeah, it was super weird. And then these are the followers of the mommy bloggers. So these are basically the people who eat up all of everything that the Neo-Sadducees are putting out. So these ladies will put out, this is like these, you need to have the Stanley Cup and the Lulu leggings, and you need to go get all of these tokens for status, you know, in Utah. The Neo-Pharisees are like, okay, tell me what I need. And then these are the ones that are like, I want to be just like them. So they start up the MLMs and destroy every relationship within like a 5-mile radius that they have, you know, because they're like, hey, does anyone want to buy preschool books for $82 a book? Nobody? And then they just keep spamming you again and again and again. You're just like, you've destroyed the relationship at that point.
Well, this leads me to my new business idea that I just thought of today, actually. I'm going to start a restaurant that charges you a day later. So everyone can come and eat for free on Sunday. You're not breaking the Sabbath, right? And you pay for it on Monday. Yeah. I think it'll go great. You know, I think we'll even just phrase it as you are donating money in return for your free meal. It'll be perfect. No Sabbath breaking, according to the Neo-Pharisees. Everyone wins. You know, so that's my new business idea. I need a name, though. I'll have to think of a name for it.
If you don't call that the Sabbath Supper Club, I will be so disappointed.
There we go. The Last Supper, you know, yeah. Something like that.
Ooh, there you go. Yeah. That's perfect. Right on every corner in Utah, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it'll work.
So I've had a run-in with like a Neo-Pharisee. This is in my business. So I own my business. This guy, he approached me. He was like, all right, he agreed to everything. I sent him an invoice. He's like, oh, everything's looking great. He's like, can you just backdate that invoice? This was like April. He's like, can you backdate that to December? And I was like, I didn't know you in December, man. And he was just like, oh, well, I know that. It's just a little tax code, little trick hack that I do, you know, and it's really not that bad. And I was just like, I got my master's degree in finance, and I was like, if there's one person that I don't want knocking down my door, it's the tax man. Okay. I'm like, I'm not helping you cook your books, man. And he was just like, hey, he got real serious. He was like, hey, this is a strategy that was given to me by a stake president, you know, like that was going to do anything to me. You know, he was like, oh, I didn't realize that a stake president is breaking the law. I was like, you ever heard of Judas Iscariot? Ringing any bells?
That dude's that's insane. See, but like people throw like I'm a stake president around all the time, you know, and then as some moral authority, and all of a sudden you're committing tax fraud, you know, like that's insane.
Right. So, anyway, I held the line, and he was like, fine, you know, and then we like, I never talked to him after that. I was like, dude, you're a weird dude. It leads to, like, these are the weird members. Like, these are the members that are super weird, that do weird things in a weird way that completely contradicts the faith. So probably a lot of her complaints are focused on like the neo-Pharisees, you know. Oh yeah.
Well, real quick,
I would say. Go ahead. Yeah.
I said we've got a lot of comments coming in, so I just wanted to mention a couple of them. Let's see. Desert Primrose. Where did that one go? Oh yeah, right here. She says, "I'm joining late, but this may be off topic. But the worst thing to come out of Utah, maybe ever, is the term garment girlies. Is that a thing? What's a garment girly? Does anybody know?
Bro,
that's pretty gross.
This is not the right group for that.
I think that I think those are the ones that are showing off modest outfits for the new garments.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think you're right on that.
Like buying them and renting them out.
Or yeah.
Okay.
That could be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like young influencers who are like showing you how to, you know, what to wear to cover your garments and still look good, kind of a thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's just toxic influencer culture. Yeah, I think that's fun. Oh yeah, so there's another comment confirming that. There you go. Yeah, AZ guy says, I'm a convert in AZ. I definitely noticed the Utah bubble. It does make the church cringy. It does. Yeah. I mean, it casts a weird perception from that. You know, if you took the church headquarters and just moved them to like Brazil tomorrow, what does that look like for Utah? You know, like what does that look like for the culture in Utah or for the church culture worldwide? Right. I think I think we've got this cringe about Utah that we need to cleanse for sure. Most of the weird members are the ones that end up in prison. This is what the brother Jared says. I talk to them a lot at work and they truly don't understand the gospel. Yeah, I think that's a big one is that, there's just a fundamental misunderstanding or lack of education around the actual doctrine that leads to these weird outgrowths into the culture. I think that's good for now. Yeah, sorry. Back to you, Hayden.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I would say some other side features of Utah culture that I've noticed, there is heavy responsibility diffusion. So responsibility diffusion, for those of you who don't know, it's basically if there are a lot of people around that are physically present that could do the job, then it takes the load off of most people. So it's called the bystander effect. So if there is something that needs to be done, then if there are a lot of people around, then people feel less urgently that they need to do it themselves. So you'll see this like wards of like 500 people that only have like 90 that show up on Sundays. And then out of that 90, you see like 5 families that keep the ward running. So it's just like the rest of the country, you know, or the rest of the world even, where there's 5 families that keep the church going, but it's in a ward of like 500, 600, maybe even 1,000, you know. So there is a lot of that. There is a lot of unintentional exclusion of like non-members and inactive and less active members. So I had like a stake presidency member tell me one time, like he has a gal who works for him who's less active, and she's like, I need to get my kid to school, and I saw that there's like this big carpool that formed, and it was all agreed upon by all of the girls that go to church, and all of their sons are now in this carpool. I would love to be a part of that carpool, but they agreed on it at church and I wasn't there, and now I feel left out. And I tried to get in, but they said it's all done. So that I'm out of luck at this point, basically was what she said. And so she felt like she was being excluded. And there is a little bit of that, you know, it's easy for that to happen. Now, I will give some pushback on that too, because in Utah, if you are an active member that goes and visits people in Utah, like your ministering assignment, sometimes you're going to knock on doors where you get so much hate that you're like, I'm done. Like, I'm not visiting anyone else, because like the less active and inactive members that are in Utah are less active and inactive for a reason. Like, they do not want to be contacted. A lot of times they get pretty aggressive against the church. And so I think it may not be 100% because members of the church are actively excluding them, as much as they're like, I don't want to bother them because they might rip my head off. So I will add that little side note to it. The other piece that I found, family proximity damage. So you'll actually see a lot of wards end up weaker. So they're not as united or cohesive because members have families that live close by. So every Sunday, instead of like checking into the ward and staying after and connecting, or by checking into activities or things like that, they use all of their free time to go visit their families in Pleasant Grove, or visit their families, in Bountiful with the nice houses and stuff. So you'll see that a lot. So I was in a ward where it's like half of the ward would just go visit their family. So we would try and run activities, we would try and do things, and nobody would come because they were just all spending time with their family that lived like a couple miles down the road, which was frustrating.
That's a tough one though, because you don't want to say like don't spend time with your family, right? Like that's kind of tricky.
Right.
Yeah, we do. We also, I've seen that in ours. Actually, the members that did it were also from Utah, surprisingly. But it was like this weird, it was like this weird, like, you're here during the week, but on the weekends you're always traveling,
always gone
to like other places. And like, once again, like I agree, Tanner. It's like you don't want to tell them like, well, just don't travel, but at the same time, it's like, do you somewhat have an obligation to this ward here? You can't be the perpetual. You can't be the perpetual visitor at other wards. Kind of skirting like responsibility because you're just always gone. Like, not for work things, So
that's huge in Utah with all the like mission farewells and all the baby blessings and everything like that. Like, you could easily spend half the year in other wards if you're not careful,
Yeah. Like when I was in high school, there was an entire group of kids that would farewell hop. So they would just spend every single Sunday going to a different friend's like farewell or homecoming, so that they only had to go to sacrament someone else's ward and then immediately bounce to that person's house afterward for the big farewell or homecoming party, So it was like a double whammy. It's like, not only do I not have responsibilities at home, but I also get free food, and get to say hi to my buddy.
Last Supper restaurant also caters. Just want to put
That's it.
Let me share you like a real quick example of kind of like the dark side of
Go for it.
Kind of when that doesn't work out really well. So I obviously have moved away from Utah. My only two brothers have both moved away, right? And so the only person that was left in Utah in my family, my direct family, was my dad. And he's since passed, but we come to find out he had like dementia and stuff we didn't know, and it was really hard for us to kind of try to like support him, take care of him from 3 different states across the country, right? We got really lucky. He had his ministering brother lived across the street from him, and that guy is a saint. That guy was, I mean, I to this day he's like an idol of mine. However, here's the dark side of it. At one point, that ministering brother assignment got changed to somebody else in the ward. We had a situation where like we couldn't get a hold of my dad. But we're calling him. We had like security cameras at his house. We hadn't seen him like walking around the house for days. We're like, is dad dead? Like, what's going on? So I call this guy and ask, can you just go check in and see if like my dad's still alive? Like, we can't get a hold of him. Yeah, no, that seems like a family thing, basically was the response. I'm like, no one lives there. Like, it was just this like massive hesitation. And ultimately the guy was like, I can't go over. I won't go over. And I am like absolutely convinced that it was because the culture was such that it was like, no, families take care of each other. That ministering brothers, like, that's not what they do. They just go over and like share a spiritual thought and then go home. That's what they do. I'm not here to like help in the case of somebody like dying, that's not my job. That's like the family's job. Luckily, I called like the old ministering brother, and he's like, "Yeah, let me go check and find out what's going on." He was,
That's insane.
Wow.
It was a good thing that he did, because like my dad needed help, and so that's kind of the dark side of that, like that family bubble, and that definitely can happen with people that are like, "Hey, I don't need my ward. Like I go to church to take the sacrament. That's the only thing that I need the ward for. Other than that, like my support system is my family. That's all here in Utah."
Yeah.
People that don't have that's a challenge.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like the final point that I have written down here about Utah culture is just nice guy culture is OP in Utah. Okay. Like it is so insanely prevalent that like most of the meetings where at least this is how it was for me when I was a young man, but like I felt like most of the meetings were like the presiding priesthood authority member would get up and he'd be like, "Well, sisters, we are just so grateful to have you here and just to bear with us knuckleheads in the church," and then he'd turn to the brethren, "Quit looking at porn. What's the matter with you?" And it was just like, I'm just trying to be a good kid. I didn't sign up for this. What's going on? It leads to a lot of like browbeaten men and a lot of very coddled women, to the point where like when I was on Trek, I tell you what, I didn't have a good Trek experience. We could create a whole episode about Trek, but like
probably should. Yeah.
It was during the time where they were like, "Hey, somebody wrote an article in the Liahona that was like, hey, I once gave a less active kid a very involved calling, and it turned him active." And so every leader in the ward was like, "That's what we need to do," And so like the big brother and sister in my group were both inactive kids that hated it. They didn't want to be there, and they loaded up everything on me. So I had to pull the cart basically by myself because I was bigger than the other two kids that were really quiet. And then there was like 2 or 3 girls that would just kind of hang on the cart. They weren't really pushing, and then they would just kind of sing. So we're doing the woman's pole where it's like a big stretch up a mountain. Like it's like a hill. It's like maybe less than a quarter mile up a hill it's just women. So the women just have to pull by themselves. And I look around and all the priesthood leaders were like, "Now boys," they're tearing up. "Boys, please restrain yourselves. I know you're going to want to help these sweet, sweet sisters, but don't do it," And then I look around, I see all these young men that are like crying and they're sobbing. They're like, "Oh, I want to help so bad." I was laughing. I was like, you know what I call this? A good start, for crying out loud. I've been pulling this thing myself the whole way.
This is why you're born in this generation and not in the pioneer generation.
Yeah. Well, no, I had a really cool bishop. So I ended up giving like a sacrament talk where I vented a lot of my frustrations. I've always been a salty saint. And so my bishop called me aside after. I was like, "Oh no, I bit it this time." And my bishop was so cool. He was just like he was a down-to-earth Wyoming farmer kind of guy. He's just like, it's like, "So you had a rough time on Trek, huh?" And I was like, yeah, I did everything by myself. He's like, "You want to know what the pioneers did if people didn't work?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "They didn't eat." It's like, "You did a good thing." I was like, "Hey, all right." So all of which is to say, there's definitely like a coddling culture around the women and a nice guy culture around the men. And it leads to a lot of kind of weird, developmentally weird people, in Utah that don't really, like, the men don't really speak their mind, and the women speak their mind too much, So it's hard to find like a balance, where outside of the church, that gets mellowed out a little bit more. Inside the church, you see it in Utah pretty hardcore. All of which is pointing to how do we solve this? Like, what are our tips for this gal who wants to survive Utah culture? What should we do to help her?
I got to
move.
Okay,
no, just kidding.
Until next time.
No, I joke, but I wonder. I was just thinking, when you're around a culturally homogenous group, like I think these things become more prevalent because people are looking for ways to break out of the mold of the homogeny, if that's a word. I'm going to make up words here.
Yeah.
They're trying to be different, and that can lead to some of these weird, quirky things because they're in this giant homogenous group, and you have to do something different to be different. Where when you're outside of Utah in the diaspora, you don't have to be different because you already are different as a member of the church. So I don't have to work hard to be different because I already am a peculiar person.
That is a great point. Yeah, that's interesting.
That's very well put. Yeah.
Especially with all those big
Ryan,
words,
I'm seeing
homogeny and diaspora. And...
Yeah. I got to look
Yeah.
smart at some point.
Okay,
That's
so
awesome.
I'm glad that you asked this question, Hayden, because this is like I think we would not be doing a good job if we didn't address like, okay, what do we do about it? Like, as I've thought about this, I think like the biggest issue out of all the things that we've talked about, I can't remember if it was Jeff or if it was Sam that mentioned like the kind of affluent culture, the affluenza that we mentioned early on.
That was Tanner.
I think that's the worst part. I think that's by far and away the biggest issue of Utah culture. In fact, I mentioned I put in our like little Dasney Friends chats when we were talking about this, like if I could distill like the biggest issues that I see with Utah church culture down into like one digestible thing, it would be the Red Hot Chili Pepper song Californication. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you guys are laughing because you got to know where I'm going with this one. So I won't share it unless we want to. But I've thought about that for years. And at first it was like, well, that was because growing up in Utah, we always complained about, sorry, Sam, everybody from California moving to Utah and bringing their crappy culture with them. Sorry, that was a thing. I still kind of sort of think that's a thing, especially Southern California people. No, I'm just kidding. But what I really like, as I kind of thought a little bit more deeply about this, like if you kind of get into like the lyrics of that song, it's all about like the dark, fake plasticity and like obsessive consumerism of California and specifically like Hollywood, right? And I think that's what you see in Utah now. So I actually went to ChatGPT and I'm like, hey, can you rewrite the lyrics from Californication, but focus it on Utah and all these consumerism and all these other things? What it came back with was like phenomenal. It was so spot on to the culture. But to I won't go through that just for the sake of time, but to drill down to answer the question, like, okay, now what do we do about this? So for me, like what readily came to mind, probably because of Come Follow Me from last week, were a couple of verses from section 84 in the Doctrine and Covenants. Specifically, the verses, it's 54. I won't read them all, but like 54 through 57. And what's listed in here, there's some pretty strong language about the church being under condemnation, specifically because of vanity and unbelief, and because the church has forgotten the New Covenant, even specifically the Book of Mormon. Right, the Book of Mormon is specifically listed out. When you look at the Book of Mormon and all the stories throughout the Book of Mormon, what do we always talk about is like the theme of the Book of Mormon, right?
Oh, the pride cycle.
The pride cycle,
yeah.
Right?
Pride
We talked
cycle.
about that earlier. So like, what do we do about it? I think we have to call it out. We have to do what we're doing right now, call it out. And all of you people that live in Utah County and Salt Lake County, all you guys that live in Utah that are like living this, do what Jeff suggested and like be a little bit different. Don't be afraid. Don't be the nice guy. Like, don't be afraid to hurt somebody's feelings. Don't be afraid to be like weird and different like the rest of us outside of Utah. Like, this is where the growth happens. So
Except Tanner.
embrace that, except for Tanner.
Yeah.
So that's what I think needs to be done. Like, we got to stop acting like it doesn't exist, like we talked about earlier. Call it out when you see it. Don't be afraid to like ruffle some feathers and hurt somebody's feelings, and just recognize like, hey, wait a minute, like, is this the culture that I'm part of? And if it is, Like, there's got to be something I can do even within my own little sphere.
And to that point, Ryan, the only thing that kept popping into my head when you're talking about that is the giant mansions all around the temples, because whenever you have a temple in Utah, it's usually in a very like a very wealthy neighborhood pops up around it, right? And sometimes their houses are as big as the temple right around that. And it just does not sit well with me to have to drive through like an insanely elite wealthy neighborhood to get to the Lord's house. Not that the temple should be in the ghetto or whatever, but it does raise a few red flags for me. Like, ooh, yeah, maybe we're nearing the end of that pride cycle and it's about to restart pretty soon. So yeah, I think you're right on the money.
What would happen though? Like, what would happen if we did have a temple like in the ghetto? I don't know if there are a few maybe sort of ghettos in Utah. Like, I don't know. I think that might not be a bad thing. Like,
LA temple.
Yeah.
LA
The Idaho Falls Temple.
instead of us treating like the church like it's a country club where we show up for clout and status, maybe we treat it more like a spiritual hospital where people who are broken come to get fixed. I don't know.
I mean,
I like that.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as I've been thinking about it, I think what comes to my mind is, first of all, you've got to do the homework yourself. Like you have to figure out if the gospel is true. You got to do your homework and get your base and make sure that you're doing all right spiritually, so that what other people are doing doesn't impact you. Like, so that you are only leaning on the Savior and nobody else, so that you're not leaning on a nice guy, who looks great, but then one day just snaps and goes crazy, and then you're like, oh no, well, if he's gone, then my whole world is shaking. No, it's like, you got to figure it out for yourself, do the homework yourself. And I would also say learn, because you can do it, learn how to separate the culture from the church. It takes some practice. It just takes calling it out. And that's like part of the purpose of the channel. Part of the reason why we started this channel was just to do that. One of the things I noticed with like a lot of ex-member and anti-member content was they could not separate the culture of the church from the church itself. And so every time we do a cultural call out, it's a way to separate the culture from the church and call it out for what it is, and just say, this isn't a part of the church. This is a weird offshoot. This is a cultural weed. Yeah.
Is that because you're too close to it to see it? I mean, sometimes I think as a convert coming in at 19, I'm able to go, is this the culture of the church, or is this the doctrine of the church? I didn't grow up with it, so I can ask those questions, and it doesn't shake my testimony when I start to kind of peel away the layers of what it is. And maybe if you're too close to it, it can be hard to see. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Parents don't often like make that distinction for you, right? So, for you, the doctrine and the culture of ending fast Sunday as soon as church gets out on, ending your fast as soon as it gets out of church, it could be doctrinal to you because your parents didn't teach you differently, and that's just kind of what you grew up with. But I know we're getting close on time, but this leads to, I think, what is the best comment of the night, which is from the brother of Jared. He says, 90% of missionary work nowadays is trying to explain to people the difference between Utah culture and church doctrine. I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's probably accurate. Everyone's watching Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Everyone's seeing the cringy, parts of the church culture. And the missionaries are just kind of like the PR team going out there and be like, this isn't what it's like, like there's actually a doctrine in there that's, very, very rewarding and full of peace and will bless your lives eternally if you can learn it. Right. So I think that's a really interesting comment. I really like that one. So
like, it's just like that line from The Incredibles, like, they're not affiliated with me. That's what the church is trying to do. You have like all these mommy bloggers and the influencers. It's like, nah. I love that. I would say call it out. If you can, call it out and do something about it, just like what Ryan was saying. Do something about it. But I think it's important in the age of home-centered church for parents to try and figure out what is culture and what is doctrine, and then to teach their kids the difference, so that their kids don't grow up and wind up just like all of these ex-Mos and anti-Mos in these ever-growing anti and X channels and algorithms, they don't wind up in those and think like, oh man, these arguments that they're making make a lot of sense because they're all coming after the culture. And now that I think about it, the culture is kind of weird. And why are we doing that? That doesn't make sense. And I guess if that is the same thing as the church, then it's all toast, So as a parent in the age of 2025, it's like teach your kids how to separate them,
and recognize that not all the culture is bad. We have some good things in our culture. So like building up the good things that we have and 100%. Recognizing what, sifting, helping your children sift through what is worth keeping and what isn't.
Yeah. So before we end, let's end on a positive note. Best things about the culture, the good cultural things. Jeff, why don't you start us off?
I love being a part of a brotherhood. I love being a part of a church that I can go wherever and I'm a part of a brotherhood immediately. Like the family connection of a ward and the brotherhood that can happen in callings and in the elders quorum. I'm a huge fan of that.
I love that. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it kind of similar. What first came to mind for me was that like I've traveled a lot throughout the United States, not as much internationally, but I've traveled a lot. What's been phenomenal about the culture is that no matter where you go, you can plug in instantly, right? If you're a member of the church, you can move somewhere, you can go on vacation somewhere, you can visit somewhere, and you automatically know that you have somebody that you have something in common with that you can connect with right off the bat. People who don't have that, it's hey, I'm really stressed about where I'm going to buy this house because I don't know what church I'm going to go to, and I don't know what that church community is going to be like, and I'm shopping churches. We don't have to do that. I just know, look, I like that house and I like that neighborhood. I'm going to move there, and I already know there are people I can connect with.
Absolutely.
I love that. Sam, what are your thoughts?
I think, at least on the East Coast, I think we prioritize as a culture what matters most. And I really like that about our church. I think that when you get into kind of these distractions, I think Jeff might have even talked about this in his book, perhaps, where like the devil doesn't necessarily want to destroy you as much as he wants to distract you from what's actually important. And I think our church does a really good job, at least, once again, I don't speak for Utah, but the rest of the wards I've been in on the East Coast, they like prioritizing what matters most. And I like that culturally we can kind of cut through the fluff and say like, hey, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. I've made covenants and I see to keep those covenants because I want to become like him. And I think that it's pretty crystal clear when you just boil it down to that. So I like that as part of our church. So
100%.
Yeah. Tanner, what are your thoughts?
This might sound silly, but I'm actually 100% serious. It's food as an act of service. I think like whenever something bad happens, there are people lining up to bring me dinner, and like it's like communicating love through food is a long lost art. Like that used to be like how you did it back in the day, because that's all you had to share, right? Like historically, humans have always connected through food. And I think that our church still does that in a way. And I really like that. Like, that's just one of the many things in the culture that I'm a big fan of, Like, my wife's a great cook. So there are some people who have had elevated spiritual experiences because of the bread she makes for sacrament, right? Or like, when she makes a meal for someone who just had a baby, she goes all out. And I think that's great. It's an excellent way to connect with people and to really like make a spiritual impact by showing them that you care for them. So I love that about the church.
Yeah. I think my favorite thing, it's been something top of mind for me, especially living in Central Texas, is that we have a great culture of helping. So like when crap hits the fan, it's like you have wards, you have branches, you have entire stakes that are organized. They're sending out families, they're sending out brethren to help in any way that they can. And they don't put any like pre-qualifiers on it. There's no preconditions or anything like that. They are completely set up and ready to go in a moment's notice, to go out there and just provide help any way that they can. And the culture is great. The culture of the church is great at I guess, preparing the minds of members to look for opportunities to help and to serve. And I think that's one of my favorite aspects of the church. Okay, well, I think we have solved the problem. So, so hopefully we can send this gal the video. She can watch it. We were hoping to get David on here. If she is single, David is on the market, and so we'll plug him. Get him a wife. Check out his channel, Sorta Laban. But until next time, I'm Hayden Holm. We got Ryan Mills, Sam at Through the Mist. Go check out his channel. We got Jeff Borders, Tanner, and this is Salty Saints. We'll see ya.